All right. So as I mentioned on Tuesday, we went over classical conditioning, which is an associative type of learning. It's when we, my best example is a kitchen. When we associate just things in the kitchen, even if it doesn't have any food in it, we tend to get hungry and we start to salivate just because of the presence of a refrigerator and cabinets and stove and the like. So that's an example of associative learning. What we're talking about now is something that was coined or called operant conditioning. And the purpose behind its title, operant, is that the person has to behave. You have to operate on something in order to increase or decrease the probability of behaviors in the future. So in the case of operant conditioning, you have some type of event and then some type of behavioral response, okay? If that behavioral response is reinforced in some way, or is another term that is synonymous with reinforcement is rewarded, then that increases the probability that that behavior will occur again in the future, okay? However, if we get a negative response to that situation or punishment, that decreases the probability of future behaviors, okay? So we're really talking about an event that occurs, our response. If we're rewarded for it or if we're reinforced, it increases. If we're punished, it decreases the probability of that behavior in the future, okay? Now, there's two types of reinforcement and there's two types of punishment. And this is what really ends up confusing a lot of students. So please make sure you understand this idea. Is that when we're talking, and it's in this important note down here, when we're talking about positive or negative, we do not mean that it has an emotional quality. Okay, and I'm going to say that again. When we're talking about operant conditioning, and we're talking about positive or negative reinforcement or positive or negative punishment, this does not mean emotion. This is not an emotional quality of feeling negative or an emotional quality of feeling positive, okay? When we use the term positive and negative reinforcement and punishment in operant conditioning, when we use the term positive, it means that we're going to add something to the situation. So it's more mathematical than it's emotional based. So when we talk about positive reinforcement and positive punishment, it's that we're going to add something to the situation. When we talk about negative, it means we're going to take away something. So we're going to subtract something from the situation.
And with stalemate, and then you can eat.
Okay. So when we're talking about reinforcement, what we're talking about with positive reinforcement is something that we add to the situation that'll increase the probability of that behavior. When we're talking about negative reinforcement, we're talking about something that we're going to take away from the situation that increases the probability of that future behavior. So positive reinforcement is we'll use a child. A child does something good, so we give them a treat. Okay, it's that proverbial, you do your chores all this week, we will have pizza on Friday night. Okay, it's adding something to the situation that increases the chance that that behavior will occur. In negative reinforcement, we're going to take away something that increases the chances of a behavior, okay? So the best example of this is a fire alarm, okay? Fire alarm is very noxious, it's there, it's blah, blah, blah. The way that we get away from that fire alarm is we go outside, All right, we've taken away that stimuli that we found obnoxious, and that increases the probability that when we hear that alarm go off again, we will escape from it, to get away from it. Okay? And that's what's meant by positive, adding to the situation. Negative, we're taking away something in order to increase the chance of that behavior in the future. Okay? Now, positive and negative punishment work the same way. Okay? Positive punishment is the introduction of something that is negative that reduces the chance of that behavior occurring in the future. So, probably the most stereotypical example of a positive punishment is a child who gets spanked for misbehaving. Okay, so you're adding a negative situation, a something harsh to the situation that then will decrease the chance that that child will commit that behavior again. We'll get to this in just a minute of whether it works or not, but we'll get to that in just a minute. Negative punishment is that you're going to take away something that also reduces the chance that that person will be do that behavior again. So this is a stereotypical, the teenager gets home after curfew, so you take away their car keys, or you take away their PlayStation, or something. You take something that usually probably is positive in some way, and you take that away, and that decreases the chance that they'll do that behavior in the future. Okay, so here is some examples of both. So here's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement in action. So I'll just go through the first one. You turn your homework in time, your teacher praises you for your performance. That increases the chances that you will do your homework on time in the future. Okay, versus negative reinforcement. You turn your homework in time, the teacher stop criticizing you for turning in your late work. They don't necessarily say good job or anything, but you don't get some negative comment in the feedback in the assignment that, oh, geez, here you go again, right? That also can be reinforcing, which increases the chance that you'll turn your homework on time in the future, okay? And again, I just want to emphasize this point. This has nothing to do with emotions. And the only reason why I'm emphasizing this is where a lot of students, especially when you do your behavior modification, get these concepts incorrect. Positive, we're adding something to the situation that will increase that behavior. Negative, we're going to take away something from the situation that increases that behavior in the future. Okay. And if we look, I don't know if I have a punishment example. Here's punishment. Okay. Punishment versus negative reinforcement. And this is to kind of tell the difference between the two. Because usually when people see negative reinforcement, it means we're trying to decrease a behavior. So you make a medication, you take a medication to cure a headache. The headache, you have an allergic reaction, you avoid that medication in the future. So this is an example of a positive punishment. Something is added to the situation, an allergic reaction, and so you then avoid that medication in the future, okay? Versus what is commonly mixed up, negative reinforcement. You take a medication to cure your headache, okay? The headache goes away, you take more of that medication in the future, okay? So this is kind of the opposite of that, and that's what we mean by negative versus punishment, okay? So when we compare these, and again, I'm just emphasizing this again, you do your homework. This is an example of positive reinforcement. You do your homework, teacher praises you, you do it, you turn your homework in time. Negative, we're going to take something away. So you take an aspirin, your headache goes away, you take the medication more in the future. Positive punishment, now we're getting into punishment. So the goal is to decrease the behavior in the future. You don't clean up your room, and when your parents ask you to, parents yell at you for not cleaning your room. You stop dwindling and cleaning your room to avoid being nagged at. Okay. You come home 2 hours after curfew. You are grounded, so something is taken away, your freedom, for 2 weeks. You don't come home late the next time you're allowed to be out. Okay. So I want to talk about these just for a few minutes to bring up some of the nuances of reinforcement and punishment. Is when we use animal models, these systems work very, very well. But if you've noticed, for human beings, that they don't work so well because we have this thing we call consciousness and the ability to decide. Okay, and so I want to bring some nuances about reinforcement and punishment, that mistakes that parents and individuals make when they're using these techniques to change behaviors, especially change behaviors in others. Okay. The first one is that for humans, for reinforcement and punishment to work, you cannot implement uh, the the notion of decision. Okay. So an example being, so you tell your kids that if you clean your room every day. No, let me bring up the teenager example. Okay, so teenager is going to go to a party. The teenager's curfew is at 11 p.m., let's say. And let's say if you tell the teenager that if they're not home by 11, they're going to get their PlayStation taken away for a week. Okay. All right. In this situation, I want to focus on a couple things. One, you've implemented the notion of choice. All right. So it comes to at about 11:45. And let's use a guy. He's at a party with all of his friends. They're all there. Everyone's having fun. He's drinking this juice that is making him feel really well. He is doing really good at a game he's doing, and there's these girls around him that are going, "Oh, you're so good at this game. You're so amazing." And, "Oh, I like spending time with you." So it's 11:45. The teenager should be getting ready to leave, right? Because if 10:45, because he knows he has to be home by at 11 or he's risking his PlayStation. He has the implementation of choice. And in that moment, he is being severely rewarded for the behaviors that he's doing right there and then, drinking the juice, having attention from positive attention from the opposite sex. Friends are partying. He's being reinforced for being there in the moment. And the probability that he's just going and goes, I gotta go home, are very, very low because he has the ability to implement choice into the situation. Okay. Now, future parents, if you want to use these behavior modifications techniques correctly, here's how you do it. Billy, your curfew is at 11 p.m. or there will be consequences. And Billy goes, "Well, what are the consequences?" You'll find out if you're not home at 11 p.m. All right. You're not giving a choice there. You're not giving this choice between losing a PlayStation, for example, or being there with friends and juices and positive attention from people we want positive attention from. Okay, we're not doing that, right? So Billy is going to get 11 at 10:45. He might start to think, geez, I wonder what will happen if I not home at 11. Okay, now at 10:55, all right, I'm talking about older people, older parents now. You're in your, your moo your robe, maybe your curlers. All right, at 10:50, you head over to where the party is. And at 11:01, you knock on the door and they answer and you say, "Where's Billy?" And they go and they find Billy. And I promise you, this is what we call one trial learning. I promise you, Billy will not be home by curfew after that, because there's two elements to this situation. One, you reduce the human element of choice. You didn't tell Billy what the consequence would be, so he really never had a choice. Second, you effectively implemented what we call positive punishment, putting something negative into the situation that will decrease that behavior in the future. And I guarantee this is one trial learning. Billy will not be late for curfew after that. And so one using these techniques, and I know this sounds kind of manipulative, one of the mistakes that parents and people make is they implement the element of choice. Okay. The second thing they do that we make a mistake of is we don't properly reinforce or punish the actual behavior. Okay. So for example, a kiddo steals a cookie in a cookie jar, and mom and dad come and we'll use an extreme level. They punish little Billy for stealing that cookie in the cookie jar, right? The issue is that the punishment did not equal the behavior that was committed. And what Billy is going to learn in that situation is not to take more cookies, but to fear mom and dad. What was punished is the presence of mom and dad not stealing the cookie. And so what we find in these situations is, does spanking, does that type of punishment really influence behaviors? The actual answer is no. What it does is it reinforces who the controllers in the house are. But when those people who are in control aren't there, the children will still commit the behaviors that the parents thought they punished. And this is one notion of punishment and reinforcement that is not well understood, is that when you under reinforce or you under punish or you over punish or you over reinforce, it has no effect on the actual behavior that you were trying to change. So reinforcements and punishments have to equal the behavior that was committed. All right, so in the cookie jar example, it would be reducing other things, for example, not spanking the child, because spanking the child is only going to create fear in the parent. It's not going to decrease the cookie stealing that the child does. And that's an important thing to do, keep in mind. The other issue that I want to bring up when we're dealing with these types of behaviors and reinforcement and punishment is that we always have to understand that when we are changing behavior, we're also involved in the behavior itself. We are being reinforced and punished for that behavior. So when a parent spanks a child, that's reinforcing for the parent, because the child stops that behavior in front of them. They don't stop the behavior, they stop it in front of them. So the parent thinks that modality worked. And I'll bring up another really good example of this, and this is tantrum behavior, okay, and throwing tantrums. So we'll take little Billy, we'll put him in, let's go with Fry's grocery store. And every time mom takes little Billy to Fry's grocery store, Billy wants a candy bar. Give me a candy bar, 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 give me a candy bar. And I want you to note this is going to be an example of negative reinforcement. And then little Billy starts throwing a tantrum and hitting and yelling, and what does mom do? Mom gives Billy the candy bar, okay? Now, what is going on in this situation? We have two forms of reinforcement. Billy is being positively reinforced for the tantrum behavior, but mom is being negatively reinforced for the tantrum behavior. So giving Billy that candy bar takes away that negative stimuli, which will increase the probability that mom will give in to the candy bar in the future. And Billy is learning, if I throw a tantrum, I'll be positively reinforced. The candy bar is added to the situation, and my behavior will be reinforced or will continue in the future. I want you to note, I know parents and adults think that they're smarter and more intelligent than children, but these types of reinforcements occur on the limbic system of the brain. Remember, when we go back to brain psychology, limbic system, the unconscious emotional areas of the brain, are what are being reinforced when we're doing operant or classical conditioning, meaning that we're not always aware that we're being reinforced or punished for a behavior, and that's affecting our behavioral output, okay? So what do we find? And I'm going to bring up the child tantrum behavior again. So we get little Billy, we put him through some type of treatment, right? And we've done this experimentally where little Billy is no longer throwing a fit in the grocery store. What do we find the behavior of mom, though? Okay, is what we find is when we stop the tantrum behaviors of the child, mom will actually go by the candy bar aisle and push the cart closer to those candy bars more frequently now. In fact, in one experiment, they did this too, where the child no longer was throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. Mom went by that candy bar aisle 5 times more than normal. And not only that, she did her grocery cart 3 times closer to that candy bar than in previous times when that child threw the tantrum. Why? Because on an unconscious level, what mom needs is that reinforcement for that behavior that she once was reinforced for. Okay? And so when we're looking at changing behaviors, we have to look, and it includes multiple individuals. We have to look at changing behaviors for all of the individuals, not just for one. The most effective treatment for child tantrum behaviors is to treat the child and the parent. And that is the most effective way to get rid of tantrum behaviors in especially children. And I will give you a hint, adults as well. So there's that as well. Okay. And so this is an example of the nuances of operant and classical conditioning, that one, once you provide the element of choice, these laws of operant conditioning go out. They're almost not even applicable anymore. Two, when we're trying to change behavior in someone else, we also have to look at our behaviors and how that is influencing the situation. The example of tantrum behaviors is that example. Three, the punishment and reinforcement have to match the behavior that was committed. If you over reward or under reward, if you over punish, if you under punish, these laws don't apply. They don't work. Okay. So those are some nuances I want you to think about when you're looking at your behavior modification program. So if you're looking at, for example, reading more, okay, the reward you need to put in place for reading more needs to be equivalent to the behavior committed. So if you're going to put something like, if I read 100 pages, I will go party with my friends on Friday night. That's not going to work, okay? Because the behavior you committed and the reward you're going to give, the reward is going to be over rewarding the situation. So think very consciously about the punishment or reinforcement that you're going to use when you do your behavior modification assignment, okay? The other thing that your assignment is going to require of you is to come up with a schedule of reinforcement or a schedule of punishment, okay? And there's two types of schedules of reinforcement. There's ratio, which is based on the number of times a behavior is committed, or there's interval schedules, which is based on the time, not number of behaviors committed. So let me give you a couple examples. Fixed ratio is when you get a reward every time you commit that behavior. So every time you read 50 pages, you have a candy bar, as an example. Okay. And if you look at time here and cumulative responses, fixed ratios work pretty quickly. Okay. Probably the best ratio schedule that you could do is what's called a variable ratio. Okay. Variable ratio is when you're rewarded sometimes, but not all the times that you commit a behavior. So maybe, again, reading 100 pages a day or 100 pages. Maybe you're rewarded every time you read 300 pages. Sometimes you're rewarded for reading the 100 pages. Sometimes you're rewarded for reading 50 pages. Sometimes you're rewarded for reading 500 pages. You never know when that reward is going to occur in a variable ratio situation. You're not sure if it's going to be when I do it 5 times or I do it 10 times or if I do it 1 time. Okay. If you'll notice, this is the quickest path to learning when we look at time versus cumulative responses, that a variable ratio, because you're always, this is maybe the best example of a variable ratio schedule is gambling. So you go to a casino and you never know if the next roll or the next pull of the lever is going to reward you or not. So you continue to pull that lever, hoping that that next time will be the reward. Okay. In a variable or fixed interval rate reward system, this is when it dealt with time. Okay. So the easiest one to explain is a fixed interval ratio, and probably the best example of this is a paycheck. So let's say you're paid bi-weekly. So you know for working, you're going to be paid every 2 weeks, okay? And this is what we find in behavior, is we find that when a person gets paid, their performance is low, and then in the second week, just before that paycheck, their behavior increases, their performance increases. And then it flattens again. And then it increases a couple days before the paycheck. Okay, so this makes what we call a scallop slope or a step slope when we're using a fixed interval type of system. So in your behavior modification plan, just please make sure you note. So Say, hey everyone, hold on for just a minute. Let's take a quick break. I need to go do something really quick. I'll be right back. Hey, gang, I apologize. Just give me a couple more minutes, okay? Hello, everyone. Give us just 1 or 2 more minutes and we'll be ready to go. All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, all right. I apologize about that interruption. I had some technology issues with the computer and everything. So I'm on a different one right at the moment. So what I think I should explain is I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the interval system. So there's a fixed interval and then there's a variable interval. And the fixed interval is like the paycheck. You get paid every 2 weeks, and it creates a scallop in behavior, right? So you get paid and then you don't perform as much, and then closer to paycheck, you increase your performance. And so that's kind of how that works. The variable interval is when it's not based on your behavior, how many times you do something, but you're randomly rewarded for something. Okay. So during the week, instead of time, let's say well, let's give a better example. So let's say in one day, you wake up and you say something positive, right? And you're reinforced for that. Okay. But then you go throughout your day and you keep that positivity going, but maybe you're only reinforced for it at noon, at 1, at 5, and maybe 9 p.m. Okay. It's not based on the number of times you did something. It's just based on random times throughout the day. Okay. You'll notice, and I apologize, the presentation is not sharing right at the moment. I'm not sure why. You'll notice that that was kind of just below the fixed the fixed ratio, but better than the fixed ratio. Okay, so when we're doing variable intervals, it is much better. Probably my best example of a variable, very variable is things like domestic violence or violence. When an individual doesn't know when a person is going to be violent against them or not. And so they can tend to keep a very consistent increase in behaviors that would try to avoid that type of negative behavior occurring in their life, because they don't know, it's not predictable of when that violence is going to occur or not. Okay. And I do want to mention that this also makes this type of schedule very unbreakable. It's harder to break the habits when it's on this type of variable type of time schedule. And same with the variable ratio. Those two tend to be the hardest when we're looking at wanting to make behavior more fixed. Though the ratio and the interval variability, the variable one, tends to make behavior stay longer than if it's on the fixed ratio or the fixed variable schedules. So when you're looking at behavior change, think about that. If it's something that you want to have as long-term versus short-term, then that is kind of what creates those. So in your assignment, that's the schedule of reinforcement that it's talking about. So are you going to do a fixed ratio, a fixed variable, or are you going to do an interval or randomize it up? And again, it just is based upon the situation, the behavior trying to change, and where you're trying to go with it. Does operant conditioning make sense to everybody as we've described it today? And especially for your assignment, does everybody understand the schedule of reinforcement? Are all those good for everyone? Thank you, Amelia and Madison. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Tyler, Julia. Okay. All right, gang. So this is what I'm proposing, because I am having technology issues. I can't even bring up the presentation for today. Is we've went over classical, we got operant. So what we'll do next Tuesday is we'll look at social learning, that other form of learning that we talked about. We'll look at theory of planned behavior, and that means by Tuesday, you should be ready to really dig into and develop that behavior modification assignment that is due next Sunday. And then from there, we'll also look at different things dealing with motivation and motivational theory, so that we have a good understanding of that. Then when we get into memory and cognition, we'll be ready to implement those internal thinking processes that also contribute to our behavior. Does that sound good to everybody? All right. All right, gang. Well, let's get out of here for today, and we will see you next Tuesday. Please have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next Tuesday.